Hey there folks, welcome to the Myst Iceberg. The Myst series has had an undeniable effect on the gaming industry. It wasn't just genre defining, it was genre creating. If you've ever spent any amount of time playing Flash games growing up like I did, then you probably have Myst to thank for all of those first-person point-and-click puzzle games. If you like intriguing liminal environments and really rigorous puzzles, then give the game a try before continuing with this video. But if you're already a fan of the series, or you don't think you'd play them but you want to hear about some cool lore, then this video is totally for you. An iceberg chart, if you don't know, is a collection of facts, theories, and Easter eggs organized by their obscurity from top to bottom. I'll be breaking down every single one of these entries, and I'd like to give a huge thank you to Reddit user Calm Arm, who created this chart and gave me express permission to make this video. Calm also helped me with finding information whenever I was stuck on my research, so he played a really important role in making this. Thank you to Calm and all the enthusiastic members of the community who've been contributing to the Myst series for almost 30 years. It's actually really crazy, but we're going to get into all that, so let's dive in. Myst. Myst was a revolutionary point-and-click puzzle game which was released in 1993. It was created by brothers Robin and Rand Miller. The game sold around 6 million units, and for a while it was the best-selling PC game of all time. The game's success is largely attributed to its deeply intriguing environments and story, as well as its unique and immersive gameplay. The visuals were achieved by pre-rendering images of 3D scenes and assembling those pictures in an order to simulate movement through a real environment. This resulted in a game that looked extremely ahead of its time, as it was impossible for computers to render real-time 3D graphics with this degree of clarity. The game's story, on the other hand, sees the player serendipitously transported to Myst Island after a tragedy has befallen the family that was living there. The player must do their best to resolve the narrative with only the contents of the abandoned island at their disposal. By the end of the game, the player learns a bit more about the members of the family that lived there. Atris the father, his two sons, Akinar and Cirrus, and Atris's wife Catherine, who is also mentioned a few times but doesn't appear in-game. The game was made under such tight constraints that Robin and Rand Miller had to do all of the acting work themselves, with Robin appearing as Cirrus and Rand as Akinar and Atris. Atris he would continue to portray for the rest of the series. Riven. Riven was the highly anticipated sequel to Myst. It totes a much larger and more elaborate system of puzzles as well as a larger map and higher visual fidelity than the first game. The story takes place immediately after the events of the first Myst, and sees the player rescuing Catherine, who we only heard rumblings of in the first game. It also provides a lot more insight into the player's origin as well as some of the other characters. For instance, we get to meet Atris's father, Gen, who is the primary antagonist. Riven is pretty much an improvement on the already stellar formula of Myst in every way. It's a perfect sequel. Myst 3. Myst 3 Exile was unsurprisingly the third entry in the series. It was the first game not to be developed by Cyan Studios, instead being developed by the now defunct Presto Studios. But despite this, the gameplay is very authentic to the first two entries in the series, only with the addition of fully panoramic vision rather than the fixed point perspective of the previous games. The story sees the player once again helping Atris, this time to recover the key to the future of his entire civilization, which has been suddenly stolen by an unfortunate fellow named Saverdo, who has suffered greatly at the hands of Atris's sons and desires retribution for those perceived wrongs. Myst 4. Myst 4 was the fourth mainline entry in the series, developed by Ubisoft and published by Cyan. While its puzzles and story are considered a little bit weaker than those of the previous games, it's still a totally respectable entry into the series, making small improvements on general gameplay and visuals. The game sees the player initially helping Atris to resolve a moral dilemma of his two imprisoned sons, but it quickly gets out of hand and becomes a quest to rescue Yisha, the youngest child of Atris and Catherine. Linking books. Linking books are in many ways the primary narrative device used in the Myst series. Essentially, they are books that are handwritten by very skilled artisans that are able to transform them into portals or links to other worlds, which are referred to as ages. This process, sometimes referred to in-game as the art, is more precisely known as registoi. You travel through a linking book simply by placing your hand on the book's linking panel, which is a sort of animated window that shows the age that the book links to. Linking books are not to be confused with descriptive books, however. A linking book needs to be written in the exact age and location that it is meant to connect to, meaning losing or destroying a linking book while you're in another age can cause quite the predicament, because you can't write them remotely, but you need them to return to wherever you came from. That means if you lose one, it's impossible to get back to where you came from without help. Trap books. A trap book is exactly what it sounds like. It is essentially a linking book that has been very subtly altered by changing key lines of text on the book's pages. The result is a book that has a partially severed connection, which can hold one individual in the void between ages. Trap books are what contain Cirrus and Akinar in the first game, and one of the key goals in Riven is trapping Gen inside one. The reason they're so effective as traps is because they are almost indistinguishable from a regular linking book. They even show an intact linking panel to the age that they have a severed connection to. Trap books can notably only hold one person at a time, however, and the player can actually occupy one a few times in the series. If another person tries to link into an already occupied trap book, they will displace the original prisoner, and the two will simply switch places. Uru/MOUL. Uru and Myst Online Uru Live are two sort of partner games, but also kind of the same game. They were developed by Cyan Studios and published by Ubisoft. Uru was a single-player campaign which was released in 2003, and it's technically the fourth Myst game to come out. It was developed by Cyan, but it was a pretty clear departure from the Myst formula, using full 3D graphics and a third-person perspective, as well as custom characters. Myst Online was an accompanying online component to Uru. It featured additional ages and puzzles that were meant to be done cooperatively by groups of people. Uru remains to this day one of the most divisive games in the series. The story is widely considered to be well structured and very interesting, but it throws a lot at the player at once, such as a massive time jump, making Uru less of a continuation and more of a spin-off. Obviously, the visual gameplay changes received mixed reception, and also, the puzzles of Uru are significantly more difficult than the puzzles in any of the other games, which are already widely considered to be quite challenging. This being said, Uru is also the single most lore-dense entry in the series, and it's responsible for many of the entries on this iceberg. There's just so much going on with this game, so suffice it to say, Uru will very likely be getting its own video, or at least some special attention in another video on my channel, because there's a lot to unpack there. Myst 5. Myst 5 is a sort of unusual entry right there alongside Uru. It was also developed by Cyan, and it's the last in the series both chronologically and regarding its release. But it features some of its own unique gameplay changes and another time jump. One of the things that is very odd about it is that it's the only game in the series that uses the word Myst followed by a Roman numeral title structure, but it uses 3D graphics that are more in line with what we see in Uru, which has a unique standalone title. The game also introduces a new mechanic that involves drawing symbols on a tablet to help solve puzzles, rather than exclusively using point and click. So this game and Uru will get a lot more attention later on in the video. Denis. The Denis are an ancient underground civilization that held the knowledge of registoi, that is, the art of writing, linking, and descriptive books. The Denis species very much resemble human beings, with only a few very minor visual differences, like paler eyes and skin, as well as slightly elongated facial features, but by and large, Denis look very, very human. They do have some pretty big physiological differences under the hood, though. For one, the average Denis lifespan is about 3 decades, and the oldest Denis lived almost 400 years. Their population was kept under control mostly due to the fact that Denis women had unique fertility cycles, which meant they could only become pregnant for 30 hours every 72 days. After this point, a full term for carrying a child was around a year. So this essentially made it impossible for them to have a kid unintentionally, and as a result, their population was never out of control despite their long lives. Denis society and history is very complex, and it's also highly detailed. Uru, the primary source of this information, contains an actual history textbook's worth of information on them, so it'll all be elaborated on later, I promise. Denis numerals. Denis numerals are first introduced in Riven, and they are the numeric system for the Denis. There are a lot of really interesting features to this system. For example, it's based on 25 and not 10. So counting up to 25 is pretty simple because each number has its own unique symbol, but once you get above 25, it becomes a bit more complicated. Essentially, in order to write any number higher than 25, you must first divide that number by 25 and then follow it with its remainder. So for example, to write 209, you need to divide that by 25, so 25 goes into 200 8 times, and then 9 is the remainder. So the symbol for 209 is simply the symbol for 8 attached to the symbol for 9. Denis numbers are vital to solving a few puzzles in the series, but luckily, most of those puzzles, if not all of them, rely on numbers that are 25 or lower. Yisha. Yisha is the daughter of Atris and Catherine. She is born sometime between the events of Riven and Exile, and she plays a vital role in pretty much every game after Exile. In Uru and Myst 5, Yisha is an adult and pretty much provides all the context for the story and sets the player out on their journey. In Myst 4, Yisha is still a child and must be rescued by the player. It's made very clear in 5 and Uru that Yisha had a difficult time in her adulthood, as she felt a terrific strain placed on her by the legacy of her family and the uncertain future of the Denis civilization. She felt that everything rested entirely on her shoulders. Denis language. The Denis alphabet is actually based on 35 phonetic sounds, meaning that there are 35 letters rather than 26, like in the English alphabet. To me, the writing itself looks a bit like cursive or maybe a simplified version of Sanskrit, and it seems that Denis is not actually the written language used for registoi. There are additional layers of complexity when it comes to writing ages. Denis can also be spoken, however, and some fans have gone out of their way to learn how to speak it. Here, take a look.
I am good is Ken Ram. I am well Ken Ago. Thank you is Chevashem. And thank you very much, or thank you, is Chevashem Bafasi.
The novels. There are 3 Myst tie-in novels, the Book of Atris, the Book of Tiana, and the Book of Denis. Each of the books explores Atris and his family on some level, and each were at least co-written by Rand Miller, with 2 also being written by Robin Miller. The Book of Atris is essentially a biography of Atris, and the Book of Tiana gives us background to Atris' family, primarily following Atris' grandfather from his youth all the way up until the birth of Atris' father, Gen. Finally, the Book of Denis takes place in between Riven and Exile, and tells a story of Atris and Catherine discovering the ruins of the Denis civilization, and recovering survivors on their journey to rebuild it. Denis is on Earth. Yes, if you haven't played Uru, then you might not know that the original Denis civilization existed in a large cave system in the Earth's underground. It's easy to assume that the Denis came from their own unique age, considering how unique their culture and technology is, but the truth is they lived close by to but separate from humans. The Denis are not technically native to Earth, however. They first migrated to Earth from a separate age called Gardene. The first Denis were refugees of another civilization called the Rene. In their long history, the Denis never attempted to breach the surface of the planet, and as such, they were mostly ignorant humans, just as humans were to them. Rime. Rime is an age written by Atris, which was first featured as bonus content for the Real Myst remaster of the original game. The age served as a sort of laboratory for a device he was working on called the Crystal Viewer, which allowed him to view ages remotely without traveling to them. The age was created based on the topographical extrusion test that can be viewed in the 4 chambers imager in the original game. I actually remember wondering about it myself when I played Myst, because the topographical extrusion test was pretty much the only thing in the first game that felt like some kind of clue, but it had no real context within the events of the story. Rime is an uninhabited Arctic age, as the cold environment was optimal for the experiments Atris was conducting with the crystals. It also plays a role in Myst 4, as Atris visits it in order to repair the crystal viewer and then gets stranded there by a snowstorm, leaving the player to face the events of the game on their own. Rime is also noteworthy because it's seemingly the last place that Atris, Cirrus, and Achenar made positive memories with one another. The three worked on the crystal viewer together and had a lot of quality time as father and sons there, but after the viewer was finished, Atris began focusing all of his energy on rebuilding the Denis civilization, and in his absence, Cirrus and Achenar became corrupted by the power offered to them by the linking books on Myst Island. Denis guilds. In Denis culture, guilds were responsible for providing key services to the civilization of Denis, and they represented some of the primary delineations of labor within their society. Guilds also played a key role in governing, after the original monarchy of Denis was abdicated by King Karath. The 18 major guilds each had several representatives which would serve on the Denis Council. The council was the highest level of government, and it oversaw pretty much all of the major executive, legislative, and judicial decisions for Denis society. The major guilds were as follows: analysts, archivists, bookmakers, cartographers, caterers, chemists, engineers, fine artists, healers, ink masters, legislators, linguists, maintainers, messengers, miners, stonemasons, surveyors, and writers. There were also 11 minor guilds, which were much less exclusive and did not play any role in government affairs. They were, as follows: actors, architects, artists, bankers, burial workers, educators, illusionists, musicians, painters, sculptors, and zoologists. Whew. That's a lot of guilds. The Bahro. The Bahro are introduced in Uru, and their story is continued in Myst 5. The word Bahro in the lore is actually a general derogatory term used by the Denis to refer to anyone not of Rhône descent. The word literally translates to beast people, and in the specific context of the games, however, the Bahro are a species of insect-like creatures who were supposedly the original inhabitants of the cavern on Earth that the Denis colonized. The Denis somehow managed to enslave the Bahro, which is pretty remarkable because they're incredibly powerful. For one, they can link to any age whenever they want completely on their own, without a book. They also have been shown to be able to slow time, control the weather, and create geothermal disturbances, all with some kind of ritualistic movements. In the 5th game, the player essentially becomes the master of the Bahro's enslavement through the use of some mysterious tablets, which essentially allow orders to be dictated to the Bahro through drawing specific symbols. The origin of these tablets is never made clear, but it can be assumed that their ability to force obedience from otherwise godlike creatures is likely what made it possible for the Denis to enslave them in the first place. And also, they can fly, and also they're afraid of snakes for some reason. The Bahro are kind of like an additional layer of mystery to the already super detailed lore of the series. They're like the gray aliens of the Myst universe. The Fissure. The Fissure, also known as the Star Fissure, is literally the first thing we see when we start Myst 1. And the beauty of this series is that it's not fully explained until the second game, Riven, which provides a lot more context as to what it is. The Fissure is essentially an anomaly that formed in the age Riven, seemingly as a result of attempts by Atris and Catherine to make changes to the age itself after it was already written. After a conflict broke out between Atris, Catherine, and Gen, the antagonist of Riven, Atris decided to trap Gen in the age by throwing himself into the Star Fissure and then linking back to Myst Island, causing his Myst linking book to continue tumbling into the void, unable to be recovered by Gen. It was a clever move on Atris' part, but the Star Fissure isn't just a void of empty space. It's actually more like a gentle river that happens to flow to Earth, the origin of the Denis civilization. So anyone or anything that's dropped in it is simply deposited safely on Earth at the base of a volcano in New Mexico. This is how the player is able to initially link to Myst at the beginning of the first game, and it's the context of the famously enigmatic cutscene that starts Myst 1. Linking books versus descriptive books. Alright, this entry is deceptively complicated. In Denis culture, the multiverse is described as a tree, more specifically, the Great Tree of Possibilities. The tree contains an infinite number of branches, and on each branch there is a unique reality, or age. So in order to link to a brand new age, one must first write a descriptive book that literally describes the age. Then the infinite branches are searched until one is found that matches the criteria of the written description. There is, however, a margin of chaos here, because no matter how thorough a written description is, there are still details that will need to be randomly filled in, because some infinities are bigger than others. So you can think of it like this. There are an infinite number of ages, but within that, there's also an infinite number of ages that look like channelwood. Each just has more minor differences that wouldn't be written about in a description. So a descriptive book that describes channelwood could still link to any of those ages, and it's picked at random. Once a link is established, though, an age sort of becomes locked to that particular descriptive book. It kind of becomes the fabric of its reality. As such, you can't duplicate the book, and you probably don't want to mess with it very much either. You're going to want to keep it in a safe place. So in order to actually travel between ages day to day, you write linking books, which, as I stated earlier, must be written in the age and location that they are meant to link to, and those can be copied. So most of the books we encounter in the games are linking books because they're much safer to travel with on a moment-to-moment basis. It's best to think of the whole system like this. The descriptive book is the house, and the linking books are the doors and windows. They can be opened, closed, locked, or even boarded up forever, but the inside and outside of the house are generally unaffected. We're going to talk more about this system yet again later, so if you still have questions, hold on to them. The Starry Expanse Project. The Starry Expanse Project is a fan-run remake of Riven, which will recreate the entire game with full 3D environments and free movement. Like Myst 1, the original Riven used pre-rendered images in a sort of slideshow, so movement and perspective were quite limited. The project has been ongoing since 2010, and the team has even been in close contact with Cyan Studios. Apparently, Cyan is very supportive of the project, and there are even some contracts that have been drafted between Cyan and the team at Starry Expanse. It's pretty crazy to hear a developer being gracious and supportive towards a fan project rather than slamming them with a cease and desist. It makes me like Cyan Studios even more than I already did. Oh, and the remake, now known as Real Riven, will have VR support, meaning that someday we will all be able to play Myst and Riven entirely in virtual reality, which is awesome. So I'll leave a link to the Starry Expanse website in the description for those who want to learn more. The DRC. The Denis Restoration Council was a group of archaeologists, researchers, and explorers who kind of asserted themselves as the primary authority on recovering Denis culture. They're more like historians, actually. Most of their work seems to build an accurate understanding of what Denis culture was. They had a 5-phase plan that they used for restoring abandoned ages for general use. This included surveying the area, repairing equipment and machinery, and mapping out key locations. Notably, the DRC is an entirely human organization, and evidence of their efforts can be seen all over Uru, with many areas sectioned off with their barriers and a huge number of journals from their researchers. They also appeared as NPCs in Myst Online. Mysterium. Mysterium is an annual fan-run convention. It was first done in the year 2000 and was originally meant to be a small, informal gathering of Myst fans, but it quickly turned into a pretty bumpin' weekend festival. Since then, Cyan Studios has frequently collaborated and co-hosted Mysterium with the existing team, and it seems to still be an active tradition that's going on to this day. I'll be sure to include a link to the Mysterium website in the description below if you want to check it out. Trap books don't exist. This entry seems to reference a statement made by Richard A. Watson, an original team member of the Myst franchise who's kind of become the keeper of all lore regarding the series. Essentially, he claimed that trap books don't really exist, and Revelations seems to make trap books completely non-canon because there are a bunch of contradictions between the events of Myst 4 and the first game. In Revelations, the player discovers that Cirrus and Achenar are being held in prison ages, rather than trap books. Plus, they don't seem to remember ever interacting with the player character before, which they certainly did in Myst 1. And also, the trap books were destroyed at the end of the first game. So what gives? Well, honestly, in my opinion, you can headcanon this whole thing to work. A lot of people have pointed this out, so I'll explain the widely held belief as best as I can. Based on the events of the first game and compared to Myst 4, it's fair to assume that destroying a trap book causes the prisoner inside not to be killed, but instead transported to the age that the book was originally meant to link to. Because remember, a trap book is a tweaked linking book, not a descriptive book. So destroying one wouldn't kill the person standing in the doorway, it would just kick them inside and then seal it off behind them. A good trap book would reasonably lead to a prison age, and a prison age is just somewhere that's unpopulated by intelligent life, meant to hold one or multiple people without a linking book to return with. It would also seem that the void between ages is somewhat incompatible with the mind. In the games, a badly severed link is depicted as a void of disorienting static, and Cirrus and Akinar have a really hard time thinking clearly when they're in their trap books. Also, it appears that after successfully entering their prison ages, they have no memory of being in the void itself, which kind of makes sense actually. Your brain can't form long-term memories when it's dreaming, for example, so maybe when it's trapped in a liminal space full of static, it can't form firm memories either. So this is where we find them in the fourth game. They remember linking to and arriving at the age and nothing else. So while Atris burning their trap books at the end of Myst 1 originally seemed cruel, we can now understand that it resulted in the brothers at least having the ability to think clearly and operate openly within their prison age, rather than being stuck in an eternal, disorienting void. So, if you want trap books to exist, I think they totally still can, but there is an official source that has confirmed that the intention with Myst 4 was to retcon them out of the series after the release of Riven, because Riven is the last game to reference them. Albeit this was via an email to a fan. So there's a lot of complicated stuff like this in the lore. Believe whatever makes you happy until proven otherwise. Tomana is on Earth. Tomana is on Earth. For those who don't know, after the nonsense that went down on Myst Island, Atris built a new home for himself and Catherine on Earth. We don't know exactly where Tomana is located, but we do know it was reasonably close to the Cleft and by extension the Denis ruins underground. This explains primarily how the player is able to visit Atris and his family in Myst 3 and 4, as falling into the star fissure in Riven would have returned them back to Earth. The games are dramatizations of real events. Okay, this one's pretty crazy. It's gotta be the most meta element of the series, and it's only referenced a tiny amount in the actual games. But basically, the mainline Myst series, or at least Myst and Riven, exist in the Uru universe as games. In Uru's lore, the games are dramatizations or adaptations of real historical events. The way it supposedly goes is that within the world of Uru, Elias Zandi, the founder of the DRC, discovered journals and other information which he then gave to the Miller brothers, who adapted them into the Myst games. It kind of makes your head hurt, right? So essentially, this was done narratively as a clever way to stitch up the existing continuity to make Uru fit in better. Any bad acting, cheesy dialogue, or unforeseen lore issues present in the first two games can just become a misrepresentation in the adaptation of events into the game. The games were meant to attract people to seeing Denis in person, so when you make a character in Uru, the intention was that you make yourself a fan of the Myst series who played the first two games, who's looking to personally discover more. In fact, that's why Uru is named the way that it is. You are you. So, it's a bit convoluted, but it's also pretty cool. It's like you're interacting with yourself from a parallel dimension when you play Uru. Yeah. Interacting with your own doppelganger, like living vicariously through another version of yourself. Huh. Face in the Riven linking panel. At the start of Riven, when Atris holds up the Riven book, a face can be seen for only a few frames on the linking panel. The purpose of the face is never made clear. Some people think that it's Gen's, and it's meant to imply that you're being watched by him while you're inside Riven. But it could also mean that Riven is serving as a trap for Gen, even though it isn't a traditional trap book. To me, it doesn't really look like Gen's face though. It's one of the many odd Riven Easter eggs. Jeff Zandy, rest in peace. Jeff Zandy was a personal friend of the Miller brothers, and he was also pretty well known in the Magic the Gathering community. Zandy has a counterpart in the game Uru, where he can be seen sitting outside of an Airstream trailer during the start of the game. In Uru, Jeff Zandy was the son of Eli, or Elias Zandy, the man who discovered the Dini ruins below the surface of Earth. Jeff disagreed with his father's plan to restore the once great civilization, and the two had something of a falling out. Eli founded the DRC, while Jeff met with Yisha and began searching for individuals worthy of carrying on the Dini legacy in a new way. The real Jeff Zandy unfortunately passed away in February of 2019, so rest in peace, Jeff. Duchni. This entry is a reference to the fact that David Ogden Stiers, the voice actor behind Escher from Myst 5, consistently mispronounced the word Dini while recording his lines, instead interpreting the apostrophe not as a brief pause, but as this sort of sound, and saying Duchni, which sounds very much like duck knee. Canonically, it can now be inferred that this is some kind of snobby pronunciation of the word, as Escher is seemingly a wealthy, well-educated, original member of the Dini civilization, and he's one of the only people we meet like that in the series. The Watcher. The Watcher was a Dini prophet who could supposedly see the past, present, and future. His prophecies oftentimes proved true, but they were also vague, and as such, some people misinterpreted or flat out refused to believe his writings, making him a fairly controversial figure. It was rumored that he was born in the exact moment that his mother was linking between ages, and it was also believed that the Watcher's daughter was the queen consort to King Ji, an infamous ruler of Dini who vanished under mysterious circumstances. Woba. Okay, this one is a deep cut. In one of Cyan's earlier games, Cosmic Osmo, the player can startle an alien by sneaking up behind them, causing it to speak briefly in its own native language. The first word the alien uses is Wobanobango, which was shortened by the community to Woba, and used as an exclamation of surprise and or shock. Woba.com is also a seemingly defunct blog which supposedly belongs to Rand Miller that would share interesting and engaging content. Quantum mechanics. Alright, I would like to preface this entry by saying that I am not a quantum physicist, nor do I intend to impersonate one by explaining this entry, so if I make a mistake, then it's probably because I'm talking about magic interdimensional books and not writing a graduate paper. Anyways, this entry refers to the way that changing a descriptive book is meant to work. If we review earlier entries, we can recall that descriptive books are the most important component in developing a link to a new age. They contain the sort of master connection, and they're one of a kind because they need to perfectly describe the age that they link to and only that age. If this is the case then, how is it that an age is able to be altered? For instance, Atris claims to have added a ship into Stoneship by writing it into the descriptive book after he already visited the place once. So what gives? Well, the answer is wave functions, more popularly known via the analogy of Schrödinger's cat. Essentially, there is a wave function for everything unobserved in a particular age. So in Stoneship's case, the only people who could physically see anything were Atris and the two boys who lived there at the time, Emmett and Branch. So every uninteracted with area within that age is in a superposition between any number of states, rock or no rock, person or no person, ship or no ship. These superpositions can be written as equations known as wave functions. So essentially, any wave function in any unobserved part of an age can be collapsed by either a sentient being observing it or by writing something into the descriptive book that states the position one way or the other. So Atris wrote the ship into the age, but failed to clarify if there was a stone where the ship already was. So while he did collapse the wave function for the ship, there was still a function present for the stone, which collapsed when he visited the place and physically saw that there was a giant rock stuck inside of the ship he made. Generally speaking, altering a descriptive book is pretty dangerous, and only attempted by very skilled practitioners of the art. A mistake could result in the book linking to a slightly different or unstable age instead of the one it was originally meant to link to. So with all this in mind, I think it's fair to say that Atris probably wrote Stone Age to experiment with altering descriptive books, because he talks about how Emmett and Branch also just kind of blipped into existence when he was walking around. Like, the description of the age was deliberately too vague to include them. And honestly, the structure of the place with all of those floating, overlapping islands would make it optimal for leaving parts that were guaranteed to be physically unobserved. Fan-made ages. The fan revival of Myst Online Uru Live came with the added benefit of fans being able to add their own ages to the list of explorable areas. This is really cool because it means that skilled artists are now able to literally create their own ages. So the Denis dream is very much alive and well even now in 2022. Obviously, these ages are of dubious canonicity, but considering that the Great Tree of Possibilities is infinite, in my opinion, anything that doesn't actively contradict the games seems to be perfectly feasible canon to me. I'm planning on maybe streaming some of the Myst Online revival at some point when I can find the time, so let me know in the comments if you're interested and I'll try to prioritize it, and stay tuned for that. Atris's Donuts. There is a very amusing Easter egg in the Real Myst remaster of the original game, in which Atris can be heard asking if you brought him some food. This is probably just an outtake of Rand joking around that they wanted to tuck away somewhere in the game, because it's only activated by putting 2 separate special combinations in the fireplace, so I don't think you'd ever reasonably stumble upon it on accident.
Ah, my friend, you brought the Big Macs and the fries. The donuts, my friend. Did you bring the donuts? Donuts. Give me the donuts. Well, the donuts. Fool!
Children's faces in Riven. There are 3 separate areas in Riven where developers have hidden the faces of their kids inside of the stone textures. Rand Miller's kids are in the Hidden Passage area. Robin's are seen on the cliffside in the starting area, and Richard Vanderwen's daughters can be seen on some rocks. All of the faces are found around the starting area shortly after exiting the cell. The Manhole. The Manhole was the first game developed by Cyan Studios. It was very much in the same vein as a lot of their other work, a simple interactive story with point-and-click elements. The player was able to climb up a vine which grew out of a manhole cover and explore unique and interesting worlds which emphasized engaging and surreal visuals rather than a written story with a clearly defined plot. Myst 5 is a sequel to Uru. Yes, in style, story, and overall presentation, Myst 5 is much more a direct sequel to Uru than it is to Myst 4. It deals with a lot of the story and lore elements that were established in Uru. Yisha and the restoration of Denis take center stage, and it is the only other game in the series to use a fully free movement-based system for its navigation, as well as entirely 3D graphics, apart, of course, from the Real Myst remakes of the first game. The DRC Forums. The DRC Forums were essentially a set of Cyan-run forums, which were essentially an in-universe thread of DRC employees and other characters communicating with one another about the restoration of Denis. It was primarily used as a clever way to announce things like new additions and events in the game, as well as to establish lore that was difficult to naturally fit in elsewhere. It seems now to be defunct, as the link to it simply takes you to Cyan's website, but original players of Uru talk about the DRC forums with a deep sense of fondness and reverence, so clearly it was a cool place to read up on the game. Yisha is the Grower. The Grower is a mythic figure from the Watcher's prophecies who would supposedly restore Denis after its initial destruction. Kadish was the first person to claim this title. He was a Denis man who attempted to build a time machine in order to prove that he was the Grower, as the Watcher prophesied that the Grower could travel through time. His plans were disrupted, ironically, by the actual fall of Denis. Yisha later claimed the title after discovering the Bara tablet and drawing parallels between the Watcher's prophecies and her own family history. She was later able to achieve some of the Grower's abilities as outlined by the Watcher, such as linking without a book and supposedly traveling backwards in time to rescue Kadish. Her parents are also apparently present in the prophecies, although not by name. Yisha interprets Atris as, quote, the burdened one, and Catherine as the writer of dreams. Unfinished Uru ages. These are ages that received some level of attention during development, but never ended up appearing fully in Uru or Myst Online. In-universe, these ages are referred to as intangibles, and they are sanctioned off by the DRC because they haven't reached the final phase of their process for restoring ages, which makes them habitable again. I'll link the full list of them down below, but the noteworthy ones are Dathomne, an Arctic age that the Guild of Miners used to manufacture fire marbles, Kalo, which was a desolate landscape littered with the bones of giant creatures, Katha Island, which was the home of the Guild of Illusionists, Rebek, which was the home of highly intelligent creatures which the D'ni hunted nearly to extinction for use as work animals, and Venelem, which was a hollowed out iceberg that some people believe was used to create the ink used in Registoi. 1996 Calendar Journal Entries. There was a Myst calendar released in 1996 that had unique renders of the areas in Myst from different angles than they could be viewed in a normal playthrough of the game. The calendar also had a unique journal entry for every month. The journal entries are all by Atris, and most describe unique ages that he has written and visited, so likely some of the books that were burned and destroyed in his Myst library can be described there. Some of them are super interesting and cryptic though, so I'll link the full list of his journal entries in the description below if you'd like to read through them yourself. Silly Putty. Silly Putty is an Easter egg in Riven. It can be activated by clicking a very specific series of objects all over the game world, known as the spider sequence. We'll get into that later. But finally, once you've done that, on the viewer in front of Gen's underwater throne on Survey Island, this short movie can be played.
Instructions on self-defense in every packet.
Hello there. You know, I've been all around this wonderful world of ours, and in all of this world, nothing else is silly putty.
The Pento War. The Pento War was the first major conflict in D'ni history. In it, a group of religious zealots called the Judges of Yavo stole illicit materials and began writing ages with the hope of finding an army large enough to allow them to overthrow the D'ni and force their cause on as many people as possible. They eventually found what they were looking for in the Pento Age, and they used their new army to invade D'ni. During the first invasion, the D'ni king Corrín's wife gave birth to an heir named Ashlandar. Corrine sent his wife and new son to a private age for safety once the war started to take a turn for the worst, and he fought the Pento with limited success until he was eventually assassinated. The conflict had been going on for almost 30 years by this point. A few months after his father's death, Ashlandar returned to D'ni to seize a moment of disarray created by a conflict in the Pento leadership. Ashlandar was able to gain a foothold in D'ni and negotiate with one side of the newly fractured Pento forces. They agreed to team up and eradicate the remaining hostiles. In exchange, the allying Pento asked for new age to settle down in, and in exchange they would leave D'ni forever. The plan worked, and the hostile leaders were sent to prison ages rather than executed. Ashlandar's stellar diplomacy and mercy towards his enemies in this war led him to be known to history simply as the Great King. There's actually much more to Ashlandar's story, but this entry only covers the Pento War, so I'm going to end it here. Pissed. Pissed was a 1996 parody of the game Myst. Remember, by 1996, Myst was easily the best-selling PC game of all time, having sold over 4 million copies even by then. So Pissed's primary gimmick is the idea that you're the 4 millionth and first person to visit Myst Island, and the whole place just looks like the aftermath of a Kid Rock concert. Maybe it's just because this game hasn't aged super well, but it's really hard to understand what the point of it was. The gameplay isn't nearly as advanced as Myst's, nor is the game anywhere near as long. Pissed is literally just a slideshow of images of a trashed version of Myst Island, and none of the other ages are included or referenced in any way. All the jokes are super low effort, it doesn't reference its source materials, story, or characters in any meaningful way, and also John Goodman was in it, as a stand-in for Atris, I guess, the king of Myst Island. Yeah, it's that John Goodman too, like Roseanne John Goodman. He had even done Roseanne at this point. It's not like he was struggling for work and it's serendipity. He's just here for some reason. Anyways, Brutal Moose made a pretty good video about it that goes more in depth than I will here, so I'll link that down below if you just need more of that sweet, sweet Pissed Island content. Spider. Spider was a fictional character created by Cyan that was meant to help players of Riven and Real Myst discover Easter eggs that they had hidden inside their games. In order to be sure to separate the actual gameplay from any joke content, most of the Easter eggs in Riven, for instance, are locked behind a very specific series of invisible click spots, which must be clicked in order to unlock them. Without doing these click spots first, all of the Easter eggs are essentially impossible to activate. So Spider was super necessary in the early discovery of most of Riven and Real Myst's Easter eggs, some of which I referenced in the iceberg already, like the Silly Putty advertisement. Book of Merim. There are 3 official Myst novels, which provide additional context and history to the series. However, there has been a 4th one, which has seemingly been in development hell, I guess, for almost 20 years. It's called the Book of Merim, and just like the others, this book is written by Rand Miller and Richard Watson, and it supposedly tells the story of rebuilding the Denis within Relishan. A native of Averone named Merim would be the main character. She was a team member of one of Atris's expedition parties which participated in the rebuilding of Denis. A small excerpt was released alongside Myst 5 to tease the book, but it has been seemingly on ice for quite a while. Supposedly, Rand still mentions it occasionally, providing hope that it will someday be finished and released. So I'll link the preview text down below if you're interested in reading it. Edge/Grid. Okay, this one is hard to get information on because it was way back shortly after Riven's release, but essentially there was a website called rivenguild.com, which was created by Doug McBride and Gordon Curry. There was a section of the website called Guild of Researchers Investigating Denis, or GRID. Edge was a series of posts titled Experience Doug and Gordon's Experience, which walked the reader through a tour of the Cyan headquarters and a disc golf game that Doug and Gordon were really invited to and went on in real life. The post, however, contained hidden information and puzzles which seemed to imply that there was more going on at Cyan headquarters than meets the eye. It's quite the rabbit hole of mystery, so I'll link it below, but in summation, it was essentially the earliest known implication that the events of the games were somehow real and Cyan was in on it. It's very nearly a full-on ARG, so it's likely what inspired a lot of the premise inside of Uru and Myst Online. Even though it was fan-run, it's a pretty big part of the franchise's history, and it flies totally under the radar. Luckily, there is an archive link to experience Doug and Gordon's experience, so I'll link it down below if you want to experience their experience. Go right ahead. Denis letter numeral correspondence. Okay, so there are a few correspondences between Denis numerals and letters. There are 25 base Denis numbers and also 24 Denis letters, with an apostrophe being treated as the 25th. Essentially, they both are made of 2 corresponding parts which are then matched up to create a value. It's easier for me to show you these tables than to try to only explain it verbally. So you can see here that there are 4 symbols on the sides of each table and 4 on top. In order to create a letter, you must combine the 2 symbols on the table, which creates one of the 25 letters in the alphabet. Meanwhile, the same process can be used for the numbers, as you can see on the grid. There are a lot of Denis language enthusiasts out there, so there might be more connections that I'm not aware of. Please excuse my pedestrian explanations of what I'm positive is a deeply rich, complex, and nuanced communication system. The player in Myst 5 is Dr. Watson. Yes, so in a very interesting bit of storytelling, the real-life Cyan employee, Richard Watson, who I mentioned earlier, has an important in-universe counterpart in Uru with a PhD. Dr. Watson was one of the founding members of the DRC, but he later became distraught by the death of a colleague and sought out Yisha instead for guidance. He ended up returning to Denis in 2007 after the DRC completely ran out of funding, at which point he completed her failed quest to free the Barrow in the events of the 5th game. So yeah, the player character is definitely Dr. Watson. Eddie. Eddie is a beach ball that can be kicked around a small neighborhood in the Denis cavern called Bevan. Eddie has no known purpose in the game, and he was supposedly named after the college roommate of a Denis explorer named Dr. Patrick Greer, because Dr. Greer remembered his former roommate as, quote, a colorful and bouncy character. Dr. Watson's letters. Richard A. Watson, the Cyan employee, is famous for giving extremely detailed answers to fan inquiries about the series. It seems that the Dr. Watson letters are a collection of all of his answered fan questions, organized into a 248-page volume of insights into the development and lore of the series. I'll link it down below, of course. It's definitely a fascinating showcase of how fan enthusiasm for the Myst series is somehow consistently matched by developer enthusiasm. It's really special stuff. Callum's Killer. Perhaps one of the vaguest plot points in the series is Myst 5's reference to Callum, a surviving Denis man who apparently developed a very close relationship with Yisha. Callum was an undisputed master of Registoy, and taught Yisha a great deal about it. Yisha asked questions that challenged Denis tradition, and the two of them were able to make new discoveries about the nature of the art together. Eventually, they rediscovered the Barrow. Callum was one of Yisha's only friends and companions on her pilgrimage back to Denis, and apparently at some point Callum was murdered. In a fit of rage, Yisha claims to have killed the murderer. That's all we know about the whole situation. There are really few details about it, and it's difficult to even speculate on the identity of the killer because there are so few characters in Myst 5. Some people think that Callum's killer must be Kaddish, the other claimant to the Grower prophecy, but this isn't confirmed. All we know is that Yisha claims to have traveled back in time and brought Kaddish forward in time at some point. Yisha is not the Grower. If you've played the 5th game, then you know that most of Yisha's journals are about her struggle with her perceived destiny. She is unsure if she is the Grower, if she wants to be the Grower, and in finding the answer, she has made herself very powerful. In fact, she probably knows more about Registoy than anyone else alive by the events of the 5th game. During the period in her life when she believed that she was the Grower, she began to have thoughts of corruption, and the Barrow tablet left her control, which ruined her plans to save Denis. Seemingly, this event devastated her, and convinced her and most other people that she is not the Grower, although we never get a clear answer on who the Grower may actually be. So while Yisha certainly believes that she isn't, she might still. Through sending Dr. Watson on the tablet's quest, she may have fulfilled the prophecy in a different way than she anticipated, so we really don't know if she's the one the Watcher was talking about in his prophecies, but we do know that she feels that she failed at the undertaking, and that she is not the Grower. Huevo and Vika. Alright, this one is a really deep cut. So when Real Myst came out, there was one Easter egg that was considerably more difficult to decode than the others. In the Crystal Viewer in Rime, there were specific combinations that would yield mysterious images. It took years for fans to figure out the crystal combinations. These images were named Huevo and Vika in the game's files, and they showed ages that were very early tests of what would eventually become Uru. One of them was a jungle that never made it to the final build, but others showed assets which clearly seemed to have been used in one way or another in the final game. It was a super well-hidden Easter egg that could only properly be solved through the use of a RAM editor, so props to the dedicated people who spent actual years trying to figure it out. The Rene stole the art from the Barrow. This is a theory, since we don't have an official explanation as to how the Rene originally learned the art of Registoy. The Barrow's enslavement had supposedly gone on for 10,000 years, according to Myst 5, but the Denis only existed for 9,600. So maybe somebody was just rounding up, or maybe the Barrow were the original practitioners of the art. They taught it to the Rene, who managed to enslave them by stealing the Barrow tablet, and the tablet ended up in the hands of Denis when they migrated to Earth. It's a totally reasonable theory, and honestly the timelines sort of add up, so take that as you will. Pre-After. Pre-After was an ARG, which was laid out over the course of 2 years, from 2000 to 2002, and it was a way to market Uru. Okay, that rhymed. It seemed to try and simulate the way that Yisha's quest would have spread across the internet to call the players to the Denis ruins. It involved a billboard, clues hidden at the second Mysterium convention, and a ton of forum posts by Jeff Zandy and the DRC. I'll leave a full timeline of the ARG in the description so you can see exactly how it was rolled out. Escher is Kaddish. This comes from a pretty old theory which seems to have lost its original attribution. I found it on a Reddit post by T-Squared Productions, but T-Squared states that they can't remember who stated it originally. Essentially, this theory says that Escher is super suspicious in his role in Myst 5. He is supposedly a Denis zoologist who survived the fall of Denis by escaping to Nolabin, but he really wants to get his hands on the Barrow tablet. Kaddish, meanwhile, is the only person other than Yisha who actually claims to be the grower. Yisha claimed to have traveled back in time to rescue Kaddish, and Kaddish was building a time machine during the fall of Denis, so either way, we would have an in-universe way to explain how Kaddish would be alive at the time of Myst 5. Escher also built himself a laboratory from scratch on Nolabin, and he has a really deep understanding of the Barrow, which is pretty impressive for a zoologist. He's the only person who ever tries to get the tablet from the player aside from Yisha, so it implies strongly that he thinks he's the grower. Overall, I like this theory. Escher is just a random dude. If he's Kaddish in disguise, it makes him feel a lot more relevant to the story, and maybe he's Callum's killer too, but then again, Yisha says that she killed Callum's killer, so that's a little up in the air, I don't know. Removed due to DRC Directive 1278.4.2. This, I'm pretty sure, is a clever way for Cyan Entertainment to withhold information about a game or to explain artistic license. For example, I was able to find this quote in the announcement of the Myst VR game. Quote, "And of course, in adherence to DRC Directive 213.4.2, we are strictly forbidden in revealing any actual text from a descriptive or linking book. The last thing anyone needs is for you fanatics to successfully write a working book." So to keep an authentic aesthetic while managing compliance with DRC strictures, we are taking artistic license and just changing the English text to the Denis font. We know it's heinous and sloppy. Please don't tell anyone and never do this yourself. End quote. So based on this, we can infer that this quote is used to explain why changes are made in the games. Basically what they're saying here is that Registoi is real, but they didn't depict it accurately in the game because the DRC would forbid it. It's probably on lots of other announcements by Cyan, but I found it here first. Alright, that concludes the iceberg, at least for this first video. There's definitely room for expansion, I'm sure of it, so let me know any other entries that you're aware of in the comments, and maybe together we can make an updated chart and I'll do a sequel video. Thanks a lot for watching. This channel has grown a lot since my first iceberg, and I have some plans for it that I'm really excited about moving forward. So if you're a new viewer and a fan of the Myst series, then I really think that my stuff is for you. So please, if you want to, subscribe and click that bell. Clicking the bell is really important because the YouTube algorithm doesn't really like what I make very much. And if you're really interested, then you can get every ounce of information about my videos, my work as an artist, and some other extras by supporting me on Patreon. Your support would mean the world to me. Any extra cash that I can make through YouTube is more time that I can spend making videos, so hopefully it's a win-win. I'll also leave a link to my Discord server in the description below. That's totally free to join if you just want to chat and hang out with other members of the community. That means a ton to me too. I'm just flabbergasted that anyone really wants to pay any attention to what I'm doing. So thanks again for watching, and please stay tuned for more. It's Bob. In the Mechanical Age, if you rotate the house 180 degrees from its starting position and use Sirius's telescope, you will see this image. It's a skeleton tied to a raft floating aimlessly out at sea. Richard A. Watson confirmed that this skeleton belonged to one of the members of the Black Ships, a hostile organization that Atris wrote about in his journal on the Mechanical Age. Not much else is known about this mysterious figure other than its name is Bob, as in some versions of the game, by finding him, you will get the achievement. It's Bob. Myst TV series. As of 2020, a Myst television series has been confirmed to be in the works from X-Men First Class writer Ashley Edward Miller. Miller previously worked on my favorite TV show ever made. It's called Fringe, so the fact that he's also writing for this show is a huge green flag for me. The Miller brothers, the original creators of the Myst series, are also involved in some way. Robin Miller actually has some really interesting concept art from a previous live-action Myst project that's no longer in production on his personal blog, which I'm sure I'm showing to you right now. So, yeah, Myst TV series. Hope it's good, hope it works out. We'll see if it crops up anywhere. Disney Myst Park. For a really long time, it was heavily rumored that Disney was working on some version of Myst Island as an addition to one of their theme parks. Recently, in an interview for Abduction, Rand Miller confirmed that this was actually happening at some point. Quote, "That was absolutely true. At some point, there were some really cool plans to do some stuff with Disney. We were looking at it as the ultimate incarnation of our world. Basically, there was a place down in Florida. It's one of the island areas that they had that wasn't being used very much. But it had some walkways among trees and an island area. And we went down and looked at it and walked around it, and it was incredibly Myst-like. It was perfect for Myst. So we were all excited. Their Imagineering team was excited about embracing that and building some stuff into it and tying it to the rest of the park where you could explore and have this real-world experience. But the way Disney works, and the way it had fit in with their bigger scheme of things, and the way we didn't understand pieces of it, I think it fell apart from their point of view. That was a very exciting time. It was cool to try and pull that off." End quote. So it looks like communication, perhaps busyness on the side of Cyan Studios, and corporate baloney on Disney's half resulted in this project kind of falling apart. It sounded really logistically complicated, and I'm sure that whatever the Imagineering team was planning on building would have just been difficult from an engineering standpoint. But still, oh, it sounds so cool to be able to walk around a one-to-one replica of Myst Island. Back in the 90s, that's how big Myst was. Disney wanted Myst. That feels incredible at this point. Love to see it. There's a really great video called Abandoned that goes over the history of the island that Disney planned on building Myst Island onto. I think it goes into more history than just Myst, but if you want to see it, I'll link it down in the description. And that concludes the bonus entries that I sort of found while I was doing research for the video, and they weren't on the iceberg, but they seemed too cool to pass up. And should I wait for a part 2? No, I'll just include them at the end. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around. These are the bonus entries. Now you know why I write scripts. Okay, bye-bye.